All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're cracking open something pretty incredible. A super rare and honestly controversial journal from way back in 1912. This thing it's complex. It's definitely challenging, but it's also just fascinating. It was trying to be nothing less than a full-on blueprint for a brand new era of humanity.
And this is the motto slapped right on the title page: the method of science, the aim of religion. Right away, you've got this paradox, right? It's the central mystery of the whole thing. How do you possibly combine the cold, hard logic of a science lab with, the deepest goals of faith? It just begs the question, how did they even try to pull that off?
So, to figure that out, here's how we're going to break it down. Think of it like a guided tour. First, we'll look at the journal itself, what it was. Then, we're going to dig into the wild story behind its core revelation. After that, we'll see how they tried to turn that big idea into a practical, step-by-step system. And finally, we'll explore its strange and sometimes aggressive literary side.
Okay, first things first. Let's get a handle on what this journal, called the Equinox, actually is.
So what we're looking at is a very specific issue. Volume Y, number 7, published in London, March 1912. It calls itself the official publication for something called Scientific Illuminism, and it's the official voice of this super-secret society known only by the initials AOA. Already sounds pretty mysterious, right? And when you look at what's inside, the variety is just wild. I mean, this was not just some dusty book of spells. You've got a brand new holy book for all of humanity sitting right next to detailed instructions for breathing exercises. Then there are these symbolic plays, super harsh satirical essays, and even book reviews. It was meant to be the whole shebang, a complete cultural package. But here's where it gets really bold. Right in the opening editorial, the journal makes this massive claim. It says that this specific issue is the most important one they've ever published. Why? Because it contains a revelation that's supposed to change the world, the very foundation of their entire mission. So you gotta ask, what on earth was this revelation?
And that question takes us away from the physical journal and straight into the dramatic story it tells. The story of how this so-called revelation actually happened. So the main character in this story is the editor himself, a guy named Aleister Crowley. And the journal really goes out of its way to paint him not as some eager believer, but as a total skeptic who'd become completely jaded. He said he had lost interest in trees altogether after years of getting nowhere in his spiritual search. He'd basically given up, which of course makes what happens next even crazier. The whole thing kicks off in Cairo back in 1904. It starts when Crowley's wife, Orda, out of the blue, starts channeling messages from a being she says is the Egyptian god Horus. Now Crowley, being the skeptic he is, immediately tries to prove she's making it all up. He starts putting her through all these rigorous tests. But she passes them. And then he gets a message himself, a voice that dictates an entirely new holy book to him over 3 straight days. And this is where that method of science idea really kicks in. The journal lays out all the tests Crowley gave his wife. Supposedly, she knew nothing about magic or the occult, and yet she could pick Horus's name out of a random list of gods. She knew his specific ritual details, and she even knew his secret number. The journal actually calculates the odds against her just guessing all this correctly. It's something like 21 million to 1. Just astronomical. The real climax of all these tests happened at the Bulak Museum in Cairo. To put her vision to the ultimate test, Crowley took her there. And apparently she walks right past several famous statues of Horus, goes over to this out-of-the-way display case, points and says, "There he is." The exhibit number on that case? It was 666. The object in that case was a funerary monument called the Stele of Revealing. And this thing, with its picture of Horus and that shocking number, it became the physical proof, the verifiable evidence that convinced Crowley he had to take this all seriously. For him, this was the key that unlocked everything. And not long after that, this voice, calling itself Aiwass, dictated the text that is the absolute heart of this journal. It's known as the Book of the Law. And its central message, its most famous line, announced the dawn of a new age for humanity, all governed by one single, pretty radical law. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. The book lays out this whole new cosmology. The first major figure is Nuit. She's described as this infinite, starry sky.
Basically, infinite space and infinite possibilities. Think of her as the ultimate cosmic container for everything that could ever be. And her counterpart, the second principle, is Hadit. He's the complete opposite. He's described as the flame that burns in every heart of man. He's at infinitely small single point, the core of your individual consciousness, your drive, your will to move. So what happens when you bring these two together? The union of the infinite all, Nuit, and the individual point, Hadit, gives birth to Ra Hor Kuit. He is the active, visible God of this new age. He represents what happens when an individual's will is perfectly expressed within that boundless field of possibility. He's kind of the action hero of the whole system. So, okay, we have this absolutely wild origin story and this big cosmic philosophy, but what do you actually do with it? How does it apply to real life? And that brings us to the really practical side of the journal. See, most of the Equinox is filled with these how-to guides they call Libers, which is just Latin for books. And together they form a kind of curriculum, a step-by-step training system to get the practitioner up to speed on the principles from the Book of the Law. And we're not talking about vague philosophical ideas here. For instance, a text on breathing exercises gives you these super specific physical instructions. Things like how to use only your throat muscles to breathe and how to concentrate your mind on a single point in your spine. This is them trying to apply that scientific method to spiritual practice, for real. But it wasn't all just, technical exercises. The whole point was to weave this philosophy into every single part of your life. There's a text on devotion that explains how to turn any ordinary action, even something as simple as eating a meal, into a spiritual act. You just consciously say, I'm doing this for a higher purpose. It really shows how this system was designed to be totally all-encompassing. And that brings us to our last stop on this tour, the journal's ambition to be more than just a spiritual textbook. It wanted to be a full-on cultural force. And this, to me, is where things get genuinely weird. As you read through this thing, you get this unbelievable tonal whiplash. On one page, you're reading these beautiful, mystical lines about how existence is pure joy. And then you flip a few pages, and in a section called My Crapulous Contemporaries, you find these vicious personal attacks, calling some public figure a bloated and beery buffoon. The mix of the sacred and the profane it's jarring, and it's absolutely wild. So when you step back and look at the whole thing, the sacred text, the practical instructions, the symbolic plays, the really savage satire, a pretty clear picture starts to form. The Equinox wasn't just a journal. It was designed to be a complete toolkit for kicking off a new age for humanity. It wanted to shape everything, not just spirituality, but art, philosophy, and society itself. Which, of course, leaves us with the million-dollar question. What exactly are we looking at here? Is this the actual record of a genuine message from some kind of hidden non-human intelligence? Is it a brilliant, if very strange, masterpiece of psychological self-exploration, or is it just one of the most elaborate, complex, and bizarre works of literary fiction ever created? The journal lays out its case, but in the end, the verdict is really left up to you.